Okay, calling the Joint Committee on Ways and Means and Hawaiian Affairs to order. This afternoon, we'll have our informational briefing. OHA will be presenting their budget. So good afternoon. Happy New Year.
Good afternoon, chairs, Miley and Donovan, and members of Ways and Means and Hawaiian. Oh, I'm so glad you folks had lunch. But without further ado, I'd like to introduce our trustees that are present today. We have our for BAE Chair, Trustee Akaka. We have our Resource Management Vice Chair Committee, Luana Alapa.
Aloha.
We have Keone Souza, our one of our new trustees. We have a trustee, Keli'i Akina.
Aloha, Senators. Aloha.
And we have a familiar face to all of you. Trustee Brickwood Galataria.
Must be working in party, possibly. Fiona, you should have brought your guitar and entertain us.
Turn the time over to our CEO, Sylvia Hussey. With us today is also our COO, Casey Brown, and our Captain Poi, who is our interim policy manager. Am I correct? Chief advocate.
Well, that's
So you
that's a
see,
good choice.
I don't micromanage. I stay on my side of the building. So I have to renew myself with the different titles.
You work in my office.
So Sylvia?
Mahalo, Chair. Aloha.
Aloha.
Si Hawina la. Anyway, Chairs Dela Cruz and Shimabukuro, as well as Vice Chairs Keith Agaran, as well as Favela. Thank you for the time. I'm formerly Sylvia Hussey, the Administrator, Kapohana, and Chief Executive Officer for the Office of Hawaiian Affairs. Today's presentation, we want to just highlight the top notes of the presentation. Our budget bill is hopefully a familiar one. We have renewed our ask of $3 million in program ID for beneficiary and advocacy. It's a continued effort to collaborate with the state for general funds, as which we add our trust funds to be able to benefit our beneficiaries. And the distribution of that is through our grant process. We also want to let you know and thank you for the annual reports that we were be able to provide for you. We filed our annual reports on a timely basis, as well as the Kawai Ola, which is our January edition that has the highlights of the investiture that occurred in December. And we're able to celebrate in Haku'one, right where all of our activities are going as well. So we're pleased to be able to provide that for you this afternoon. So the top line are found in Appendix A. You will find a comparison of the budget bill on page 27 of the briefing, and you will note that it is primarily in the categories for beneficiary services. We'll start with the occupancy ready, and I want to call out that this came as a result of the legislature in 21 providing occupancy ready funds for $500,000, and the trustees in the budget cycle added another $1 million to that to be able to provide for occupancy ready efforts for our beneficiaries. And occupancy ready means being able to help provide for down payments, security deposits, anything to help our beneficiaries be occupant ready. The grant was awarded to Alulike, and so through their pieces, they are able to provide holistically for beneficiaries, because as you can imagine, just because they have a need for housing or electricity, there's also multiple needs. And the Alulike network is able to take a look at all of the needs of the family and be able to provide services for that. So the match for the housing occupancy was provided, that's the emergency financial, but the housing was provided to Habitat for Humanity to be able to provide housing granted on Oahu for families, but also to retain a list and of beneficiaries to be able to prepare them for housing occupancy efforts. And so we are getting ready to solicit cycle 2 of that effort. So you'll see that that's the first. The second is social services. Those are for the Emergency Financial Assistance Fund, education through grants, legal services. The ask this year is slightly more each year, and that's because in the bill itself, we have added 2 additional categories, that of family services, family law services, as well as home ownership, home retention services. We have learned that our beneficiaries continue to struggle to retain home ownership for whatever reason regarding that. And so we want to provide legal services to help them retain home ownership. The family law pieces, as you are well aware, the needs of our family and communities continue to be great. And so that's why we particularly called that out in the general funds bill ask. And then last but not least are 2 lines, 500,000 for INA and climate change. And that just aligns with federal state priorities that have been expressed. And so this is a general funds ask that we will match with trust funds to be able to address climate change in cultural practices as well as our communities. And then last but not least is Ohana economic stability, how to help families make ends meet, whatever that looks like for each family. And that includes housing and to be able to provide for their family. So with that, senators, that's a very top line. I hope it's familiar to the committees in terms of our priorities. And then included in the informational briefing, and you can certainly, read that on your own, are the updated organizational pieces, particularly the follow-up of the 200,000 that was provided by the legislature to address follow-up of CLA. And so the report itself, which is the Plant Moran report, the links are provided in the informational briefing packet as well as on our website. So with that, senators, we are here to answer any questions. As Chair has pointed out, Casey is here, Chief Operating Officer, Capson Poi, our Interim Chief Advocate, are here to answer any questions that you may have.
Members, questions? Senator Kim?
Good afternoon. Thank you very much. Just on some of this occupancy ready home ownership assistance that you talked about, we were talking with we're talking with WAM-HWN, and supposedly they have financial literacy, home occupants and how to balance their budgets and so forth. Where is it that you overlap, and do you guys work together? Because you have similar beneficiaries, correct?
Correct. So on the home retention, on the legal provision, part of it is to help DHHL beneficiaries retain. We've had experiences, or beneficiaries have brought our attention to that they are, they haven't kept current with their lease, or their lease is about to get canceled, and they need help, not necessarily legal, but just how to navigate through the systems. So on the home ownership and retention side, that's where we provide in the legal proviso. For the home occupancy, we approach that it's not only for the DHHL beneficiaries, but it's for all Native Hawaiians, right? So whether that is permits to build the house, the first down payment, programmatically, we've identified up to 100,000 per beneficiary for needs. So if this family's needs, Alulike actually just gave us some insight to utilize some of the funds to get families into housing and get away from domestic abuse kinds of situations, which would be part of the emergency assistance. The longer term would be for housing occupancy to help beneficiaries with paying for permits for construction or help with a down payment. And even at 100,000 is very modest given the current, but it's something to be able to provide for beneficiaries.
My question is, how are you working together? Because I know DHHL is for their, occupants, but we asked the question, is it only for those that are being awarded? Because they have a list of 25,000. I'm sure many of them also are your beneficiaries as well. And, even if you don't have home ownership, we should be giving them classes on financial literacy, on how to maneuver, how to, at some point you may get your home, you know, all those things. So shouldn't there be a coordinated effort between the two of you folks?
Absolutely. So that when we talk about housing occupancy and opportunity, that's for all beneficiaries, including the DHHL, that this is a very specific.
Yes, but are you
Correct.
folks working, are you working with them? So
So
you're not
no.
overlapping?
The short answer is no.
Okay, so why aren't we? Or why aren't you?
Have you tried to communicate with them and say, can we work together? And they just not responded?
So with the new leadership, absolutely. I mean, previously, right, they have their needs. So yes, we should be more intentionally working together.
So
on
did
that.
you folks slow down during the pandemic on having these workshops and classes?
So I would say that the experience in the pandemic is having financial literacy classes wasn't the need. The need was I'm behind in my mortgage, I'm behind in my rent. The other observation is that there was so much other funding. We wanted to make sure that there was a utilization of our funding was very modest. It's $2,000, you know, one time, whereas other funding. So yes.
So that's where you could have worked together because they
Yes.
had lots of money that they
Correct.
didn't use. And they slowed down completely and they didn't use it. So if, you know, we double our efforts
Yeah.
and so
Correct.
we don't duplicate and try to get to more, I mean, you know, you're serving the same constituency
Correct.
pretty much. Also, I wanted to find out on your admin expenses, where is it at? What percentage of your admin expenses?
So our total annual budget on the core side is about $34 million. And so when we put together the budgets for the trust fund is what funds all of the personnel costs.
And how much is in the trust fund?
So right now, our last maybe 400,
With the add of the 64.
with the add 480, 477,
Yeah.
470, 480 million based on last market.
The market
Report.
fluctuating.
Yeah.
And the 34 million admin expenses is based on what number? On what 477?
So based on the annual budgets that the constructed, and then
And what percentage is that of the budget?
so the 34 million is our total budget, and then 54 is our total. 34 is our core budget, and then 54 is our total, including our non-core, right? So we have commercial property operations. That's part of that budget.
Okay, the question was what percentage of your admin expense is of your budget?
And we distributed our annual report. Our annual report has some pie charts in there if for, you know, reference for after, but CEO.
Because we've had concerns in the past regarding how high your admin expenses were. And, you know, what kinds of things it was covered.
So I would say that for our core budgets, about 37 million, 13 million is personnel and fringe. And then the rest is non-personnel contracts, et cetera.
So your administrative expensive for your admin, what's that percentage and how much dollars is that? Because normal companies or agencies worked with, I know 10%, 15%, some as low as I know HTA, when we did their admin expense, we cut it down to 5% and then to 3.4% of their budget.
Yeah.
So what's your percentage?
So based on our last budget realignment, we have 14 million in personnel over our 54 core and operating. So that's about 26%.
And how is that compared to the norm? Across, as far as you folks look at, is that high? Is that low?
That's
That seems
actually
pretty high.
well, it includes the state's fiscal rate fringe rate of 52%. So it's high. It definitely is, right? For every salary dollar, we have to budget for $1.52 more for fringe.
Okay, and outside of salaries? what's
So the
rest of
balance between the 14 million in salaries and the 54 million is program contracts, grants, expenditures are in there.
Okay, can we get, is that a breakdown that you provided us?
I can
Can-
provide.
Okay, and finally, how much did this cost to do?
I will find out. I don't know offhand.
Thank you. I mean, it's nice, but good to know how much of your beneficiary money is going for this kind of slick programs. Thank you.
I know in the past you provided DHHL some funding, right?
We still do.
We still do.
Yeah, and that dollar amount is,
And there's 9 years more on that commitment.
okay.
the
So
three
going back
million-
to what Senator Kim was asking, some of the programs that they seem to try to do, but they can't seem to do, like the financial literacy. I'm surprised there's not a reciprocal. So if you're able to do it, maybe they can use their funds committed to that, which doesn't seem to have any outcome or very little outcome. And if you have more outcome than they do, maybe they can provide funding to OHA to do that service. So I'm not sure if you can, when you meet with them, see if that's something
Sure.
that could happen.
And do you put limits as to what they can spend the 3 million on?
It's for debt service.
Oh, just for debt
Yep,
service?
there's a amortization schedule for the remaining 9 years.
Are there any conditions where they have to at least do lot development by a certain time? I mean, or is it just 3 million just to help them out?
No, so they provide us each year, the base, so the revenue bonds that were floated and the underlying projects. They provide us an update on those projects, in which our debt service is funding. So we get quarterly reports from them on each of the line item projects.
And seems to meet the board's satisfactory that the projects are moving.
So they, when did they came? Maybe early part to share. Yeah. Yeah.
So it's really to help them. There's no condition on the money.
So we give you folks 3 million and you give that 3 million to the HHL.
No,
I mean, you give them 3 million.
that 3 million comes from trust funds.
I understand,
Yeah.
but we give you, because you can take the 3 million we give you and supplement it and use trust funds. You don't have to come and get state monies, right?
Wait, I'm sorry.
You don't
Sorry.
have to get state monies to exist. You have enough in your trust fund to cover the 3 million we give you every year.
True.
True. And then, so we give you 3 million and then you're giving out trust fund the 3 million to another entity. We could definitely give it to DHHL instead of I mean, you know what I'm saying? It's like, we give you 3 million and then you give them 3 million.
But I would say it's a 3 million that we add at least 6 million and more to be able to affect the grants, because that 3 million of general funds only goes to our beneficiaries. Whereas the 3 million for the debt service is a commitment out of the trust funds. So the same number, but
No,
different
yeah.
funding
Yeah.
source.
It ends up just being a shell game
No.
to some extent.
But you're moving around. But the point I was trying to make is that you have enough money that you folks have in your trust fund. You really don't need the 3 million that the state gives in order to function and provide all the services that you do. And then on top of that, you're giving 3 million. And I'm not saying you shouldn't, I'm just saying that to show where the money goes, 3 million of what we give, then the other 3 million goes out the door. to
But that's
another
for only
entity.
how many more years?
9 years.
9 years left.
It's not to say they're gonna.
Maybe Jared and Drew will still be here. Okay, Senator Inouye.
Yes, thank you. And thank you very much for being here as well. Question with regards to Kaka'ako Makai. And I'm sorry, Hoku, what was the new name?
Hakuone.
Hakuone. This is regarding the repeal of the residential section. Are we gonna move ahead and come up with something, or? Because it's still a dwell on you, yeah?
Yeah, but traditionally the Senate has always passed this bill and then it dies in the House. So,
We try again.
no, my inclination is to wait for the House bill this time.
Oh, do you
And if
know
the House
there's
passes
gonna
a
be
bill, then we
House
can
bill?
hear it.
Is there a House bill?
Well, it's gonna be part of their package, so the speaker will
okay.
introduce and. the
Yeah, so
president
that's
will-
why I'm
yeah.
asking. So where are we? So there's a measure, there's a bill then.
There's a bill.
You,
There is a measure that we're planning to introduce. It hasn't been
Okay.
introduced yet. Yeah.
Oh, okay, all right. I'm introducing. Okay, well, you know, it's worth looking at it. We're talking about housing. Companion to the housing. Okay, good. Okay. And the Hawaiian caucus was there today. Okay. That's a good answer. Thank you.
Well, hopefully, good luck with the house. And then if we had, then we can see what happens.
Prefer that the Senate pass it out to urge them to do it.
Why don't you put it as your?
Appreciate it.
Yeah, we've done that before. Let's try something different. Okay, any other questions, Senator Favela?
And what is, I don't know what else plan to work with the Hawaiians on, Hawaiian homes through the existing cesspool. We said the kind of question, from Hawaiian homes, but what is your guys' plan to help the Hawaiian homes to convert theirs from cesspool to septic or sewer? You guys are working on any plan like that moving forward?
No, we haven't taken that up.
No.
Yeah.
Because you know that's gonna be a big bankers burden, especially on our elderly communities when they like convert them. To me, I mean, why convert them? And you prove my Opala is making the water dirty.
Well,
That's
EPA,
all.
yeah.
That's all.
I think you need EPA.
I'm only joking. I get one more, how
You're
many?
so serious, even when you joke, nobody can tell you joking.
Okay, sorry, always just joking, just joking. But there's no way they can do my DNA anyway, but anyway. How many supporting staff positions are filled today and how many vacancies you guys have?
According to this, none.
No, so on page. There. In the section, G, so up on page 25 at the top of there. So the reorganization, the separation activities were completed at the end of December 2021. And what you have in Appendix F are all of the org charts. And each org chart has a coloration of whether the vacancy is a result of the reorganization or just regular vacancy. So at the top of 25, there are 45 positions unfilled. Almost 1/3 of the authorized positions. 16 of those positions are as a result of reorganization. I'm sorry, vacancies that occurred post reorganization.
It's not in this table 11 when it says vacancies. You have
Yeah.
zero.
Vacancies, oh, because those are general fund vacancies, all of the positions are trust fund. So you'll see all of the,
You could have given us and say they did trust funds, so we, because I click on it, and I assume you have no vacancy.
yeah, so we filled out the tables in accordance with the guidelines and then focus on all the general funds. But what you'll see in the briefing as well as the org charts are all of the vacancies as a result of reorganization versus regular, vacancies, people leaving the organization.
There's no table number for it.
Table for vacancies, no, but the data is there and then visually it's in Appendix E. For the total positions versus general funds positions. We don't have any general funded positions.
So 144 full-time employees. Is that right?
So total positions is 153. And that includes 29 positions are in the board suite. There's a couple positions open in the board suite. Reorganization only affected non-board suite positions. So total is 153. And then if you take out the board suite, then that leaves the balance. And then within that, there are 45 positions vacant in those.
Do you guys, we talked about this before about creating a baseline on stats for different issues that Hawaiians are struggling with, like human trafficking, sex abuse, prison recidivism. Do you have that captured somewhere? Because what I would like to see is the monies, once that's established, and at least we have a baseline, the dollars that you are spending in grants
Mm,
at least shows us that the trajectory and those stats are moving. Because if not, I feel like we're just stuck. Because we keep talking about all these issues and helping the betterment of especially young Hawaiians, but the stats seem to be the same, if not get worse.
and with that analysis would be the totality of all the resources being applied to that. So not just OHA resources, right? Community resources.
Yeah, but you still need some.
Right.
I mean, you're charged with making sure that.
Mhm.
I'm not saying that it's just only your responsibility, but I feel like it should be your responsibility to track that
Mhm.
and make sure that these issues are being addressed either in partnership with the state, with different departments, with different nonprofits, with different trusts,
Mhm.
so that we can see the trajectory moving. There's nobody really in charge of making sure that those lines are moving, those numbers are changing.
So I would say that part of the responsibilities of research, right, in establishing baseline in criminal justice and activating that study to see where we were, that's one effort. The other is the recent, because of legislation, right, the Wahine baseline, if you will, of that. And
But
then
if you
what
guys
we
can go
do.
back and take a more holistic
Holistic,
approach to this,
Sure.
because these are the real issues that we should be worried about. I mean, I know there's lots of things that get people passionate and emotional about, but if we don't take care of these issues, we're not really helping future generations.
Agreed.
And so I'd like to see, once that's established, that money is being used strategically to get those numbers down. And when you look at juvenile arrests, mainly Hawaiian, Polynesian, human trafficking, and it doesn't seem like, so we all acknowledge it, but then we're all looking, okay, well, who's gonna change that then?
Mhm.
Who's supposed to make sure that changes?
I actually have a follow-up on that. You know, last year was a good year for OHA and that we finally increased the ceded lands revenue payment annually and also gave a lump sum to OHA. So what do you plan to do with this new monies that you have? Is there something going to change or new opportunities now?
So that's a great question, and I wanted to let the senators know that upon the execution of Act 226, right, which included that in June of 2021, in July of 2021, the board took two actions, BAE action 01 and 02. The first action was to implement the provisions of Act 226, and that means to consider the budgetary impacts of the increase for the annual amount, as well as the working group, as well as acknowledge the 64 million of the one-time amount. The section action item was about implementing the 64 million into the trust fund with that until strategically items can be brought forward to be able to utilize those funds so the trustees can make those decisions. So practically the implication in putting the money where it needs to be, and then the policy piece of coming back is with the trustees.
Well, I'm hoping you can tie those two thoughts together though, because if we don't know the baseline of where we're at with the statistics, what strategy do you have
Right.
to make sure you can spend the money in a way that's going to make a huge difference?
Right.
Yeah, well, and just for the record, we are actively working on baselining, metric building.
So when is that going to be done? Because I brought this up
Yeah.
several times.
Yeah, so it ties into our 4 directions in our strategic plan. And so the directions were community driven, and they are education, housing, economic stability, and what was the fourth? Health, yeah, health. And so things your concerns fit in those, probably in the health
So it
side.
shouldn't be just my concern.
Yeah.
It should be really
Community
your
concern.
concerns.
Yeah.
That I want to support
Absolutely.
and help address.
And so the measurement process is, what is OHA doing? Because we deploy money for others, right? We partner. So what is actually OHA doing in their actions, and what actions of those are actually moving the needle? So there's 2 steps of measurement. We're actively working on that
Yeah.
right now.
So
Yeah.
when is the matrix going to be completed?
Well, we're
and when
coming
can it
around
be
for
online?
our first era. Our 3-year period is coming in about 1 year. Our next fiscal year end.
So if you guys can identify where Hawaiians are struggling and have a chart on each one, and then we can kind of see where we're headed.
So it's
Right,
the-
that's
yeah.
the idea, yeah.
and it definitely will come up in the fiscal year 24-25 budget construction. right?
Because I
This
feel like we
portion.
do that anecdotally already. You know, like I know we hear about juvenile arrests, we hear about trouble in school, so we funded alternative learning centers.
Mhm.
And a lot of the alternative learning centers are using a Hawaiian model to make sure that students can rehabilitate or, get some kind of awareness, become good citizens. But that was something the legislature initiated. So I'm looking for things that OHA can support, and we can either partner or things that you guys are gonna, because if you guys have good ideas, and then we can see that they actually are tangible, then those are something we can consider also maybe matching or looking at supporting, but there's nothing.
That's not true. Wasn't there a partnership between OHA and the Commission on the Status of Women to fund the recent report on the status of Native Hawaiian missing and trafficked
Yeah,
girls?
that's what,
So we're talking about stuff that the legislature and OHA have partnered on. What's the status of that?
Right, so the publication, right, the second year of the study is the next step. So the first part of the study was completed, issued.
So we do have baseline statistics in the report, right?
no,
For
but
this
only in
particular-
that one section. I'm talking
we-
about juvenile arrest, recidivism, pregnancy, all the parenting, financial literacy, all these issues that we talk about, that we need to support Hawaiians become better.
So we have the criminal justice task force reports that were done needs to be refreshed. The men's health reports need to be refreshed. The women's health report, which part of this, the women prison project. So these foundational
Yeah.
reports, yes.
So there should, going back to,
Collect.
that's all collected in one area and on a website, so we can track all of this.
Which is
Mhm.
part of our kuleana in our research, right? Partnerships with the Native Hawaiian Research Collective. So that's Kamehameha Schools, Liliuokalani Trust, Papaololokahi, right? To identify a specific thing, but point taken in terms of we need to aggregate instead of just having data point. Put this data point, this one, and then thread all of that together for a broader
Yeah.
impact assessment.
Like I didn't realize Queens is going to try to establish a maternity ward out on the west side.
Mhm.
And a majority of Hawaiian young mothers are not even going to see an OBGYN. So by the time it's too late that they need the what's that center
The
at
prenatal.
the prenatal?
Prenatal.
Yeah. Now they have to have it out there because too many young mothers waited too long to see the OBGYN. Now it's in crisis. And it's either going to be the child or the mother unless they can get that service. But a lot of this could be prevented if we can get the stats, establish education programs and stuff. But there's nothing. It just doesn't seem like we're really doing anything.
And part of that is there are things, but it's not visible, right? They're quiet or they're small here, they're over here. And to be able to aggregate all in one place so that we can see the totality of the impact is a responsibility. I agree that we should be able to be aggregating all of the data, not just for Hawaiians, but for Hawaii, because we know what's good in our communities benefits everyone in the community.
Yeah, well, if you guys can start to move in that direction, and then at least it gives us comfort that we know that those dollars are using to address those statistics.
If I could just add, so it's great to have all that data. We do all these studies, but then we don't do anything with it, right? So how much money are we spending on this of the 164 million on gathering the data? And then at what point are we actually utilizing that data? And then, so if you can get that to us, and then I also want to know, like, for areas in which you haven't funded in the past, you'd be looking at it like a Hawaiian center, Hawaiian community center that we have been pushing, and OHA, we've approached OHA in the past, and we're the only, I shouldn't say only, we're one of the only cultural population that don't have a center. Japanese Cultural Center, Chinese Cultural Center, Filipino Cultural Center, and yet we have OHA, we have DHHL, we have, all of these entities and the legislature trying to get the center, And so now that you have these monies, and it's not like you don't have monies in the trust fund, but why aren't you taking the lead in pushing this? Well, when the kaka'ako not, I mean, yes, but we've looked at yours. We can put something, and I hope Brookwood, now that he's one of the trustees, will continue on that path, because it's sad. We're the host culture, and we don't even have a center for our Hawaiian people to go to, our children to go to get.
The online office.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that conversation has filled our meeting rooms, Senator. The idea of a cultural center is filled our meeting rooms in this past few months. We're
Okay, well, I'm sad that
definitely
it's only
talking about-
this past few months,
Yeah.
but because we've been pushing it for decades.
Yeah.
And nothing has come about. So I just hope that we will see it in the next couple of years, especially when you got additional monies coming in. There's really no excuse.
So Senator, just one, the cost of the data and the research, most of the work is done internally by our staff. So when we produce research reports, they're done by our research staff. So the
Okay.
cost is internal on
Okay,
payroll.
well, you just said there were two actions, and one was to consider the budget impacts. And so I'm thinking that we're spending funds from the 164 million, so. I
So when we,
misunderstood that.
right, when we consider what our fiscal 24-25 budgets look like, we consider all the totality. We consider what we need to get done, what studies, what, all of that. And that's, we factor into and bring to the trustees a budget that is not only operating, but if there are some tactical or strategic investments that are being recommended, that would be it. Back to your cultural piece, it's also reflected not only in our Oahu meetings, but every time we go to our neighbor islands. Our neighbor island communities desire cultural centers to be able to gravitate and to gather and to practice there.
Okay, and I don't know how long kaka'ako might take or might not take, but to just say we're gonna wait till we get kaka'ako, I don't think that's a good policy to have. Because we've needed yesterday.
Senator Noy.
Yes, thank you. Looking at your balance sheet, on governmental funds, one of the liabilities is owing the state of Hawaii. Is that federal grants? Is that $300,000? It's on your report.
Senator, are you, you're looking at Appendix C in our annual report?
Yeah.
And then you're looking at statement of net position or,
Well, there's a lot. Well, I'm looking at your report.
oh, okay,
Oh.
so, the statement of net position, that 300,000.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Why do federal funds it's owed to the state, to us?
so, remember that this is a snapshot in time, so at any time, right, we have transactions moving back and forth for general funds, federal funds, other things. So at an accounting level, at this point in time, there's 300,000, sort of in transit. The reflective is on the top side where we say receivable from. So it's just a point in time.
Oh,
Federal funds, for example, in the line called restricted cash. This is the federal funds for HLIT or Palavaluluku. That's restricted federal, and so we reflect it that way, yeah.
okay, thank you.
Senator Milwaukee.
Thank you. I see OHA's responsibility not only to the people and the culture, but also the AINA environment. So I'm pleased to see that you have put in $1 million for climate change and its impacts. What is the scope of work that you hope to accomplish there, and what have you done so far, or what are your thoughts? How did you put in the $1 million?
So part of our thinking on that was we recognize that at the federal level, there's a great investment in climate change, whether it's in Native communities or just in general. So we wanted to, and then just yesterday, right, the governor announced, but climate change has always been a priority here in Hawaii. So all we wanted to do was to continue to reflect those priorities down specifically with general funds and particularly with our communities. We know in our communities that they have culture-based strategies that they have been working on forever, and we wanted to be able to support that. So we already provide AINA grants, and when we put that solicitation out, grantees or applicants apply to us and they let us know how their practices, so they could be enhancing current practice. They could be building more practitioners. So whether it's fish ponds, lo'i, growing cycles, using data of the moon cycle, any and all of that qualify for INA. And so all we're saying is we want to put more money, especially as it relates to climate change and addressing. So we know our communities are already doing that. We just wanted to call out very specifically so that we can see the alignment from federal, state to our community level.
So I want to go back to what Senator Kim brought up in terms of Kaka'ako. That's my district. And I see Senator Galataria here. As coastline, it's very important to preserve that. And I know that you have some plans that we haven't seen as yet. Your Ha'ahone sounds good. I wanted to refer you to a study that was done by DOH, and it was in 2009 that really concerns me and my community. It was due to the waste incineration, landfill, and commercial industrial operations. I don't know if you folks have looked at that in terms of what you're building, but it has arsenic, PCBs, pesticides that you will it's all brownfield. So what are your plans and how much money are you putting into correcting that before building anything on that? And I understand HCDA had just, in order to not have that contaminants get into the land to affect people, but also our coastline and our oceans, that they just had to asphalt it over because DOH required them to keep that from getting more contamination that would affect all of us in the long run. So I really would like to know, I want to know what you're doing, and then I have a follow-up question. There was a study in 2009 that was by Limtiako. It's a hazard evaluation study of Kaka'ako made in June 2009. And then there's a follow-up that they had a management recommendations on how you correct those problems. But they're major problems that would require millions, I think, if you're to get rid of arsenic and PCB and lead. So do you have anything, or you have a report that you can give us of what happened to that management study recommendations?
We don't have a report to give you folks, but I can say that OHA has done a lot of due diligence recently to understand the soil conditions, to understand the remedies needed. I don't want to give too many details before our bill is introduced, but I can tell you, Senator, and what you spoke of was encapsulation, where they use a lot of concrete to kind of.
If you're going to
put it
build on the
but-
land, you're going to be dislodging, and that's my
Right.
concern, because
Right.
all of us now are very concerned about our environment and what you do about it. And especially OHA should be concerned, because that's the future generations of our AINA. And for not only today and building for today, but really looking at the future and what do we do to preserve as much as we can of our coastline and our AINA. And we don't want to sell it away cheap for our future generations. So please, I would like a report on what your discussions are before you proceed to address these contaminants. And I see a study in your audit of WCIT architecture for $2.9 million that was done. I'd like to see that report as well, and whether they addressed the contaminants, because that was done in 2016. So it's really, really critical that you look at due diligence before you plan anything. And I understand that you had from 2012 to now 2023 to do some planning, and I have yet to see a plan, but it has to be in the context of our AINA, of our people, and helpful. So please, I'd like to see that before you proceed.
We 100% agree, Senator, and we, as part of our master planning efforts, we are doing all of that due diligence, and we'll provide what we can once it's ready.
Yeah, so if you're going to build residential, before you even do that, I'd like to see what you're building on, because there's all kinds of contaminants under there. If you talk about arsenic and lead and PCB, you don't want that to be dredged up you know what I'm saying? It's really critical. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Chairs, De La Cruz and Shimakura, could I ask a process question? Will we, similar to last year, receive a copy of inquiries as
Yeah,
a result?
staff is taking
Okay.
it out.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Favela.
Shucks. Check myself off, was too long. Anyway, on page 5 of your testimony on your pie chart of the NHTF, can you please describe an example of the capital assist, and other assets? On you guys page, on page 5.
Oh, okay. So capital assets would be all of the property,
Yeah.
equipment, kinds of fees, less depreciation and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other assets are everything from receivables, prepaids, well, receivables has its own line, but prepaids. I want to pull up the actual annual report because that's where that comes from. Here. So going back to Senator Inoy's pointing out the annual report. So if you take on page appendix C15, that is the source of this pie chart. So you'll see the total assets is 822,738,000. So that's where we get that number. And then you'll see the categories that we compress. The Native Hawaiian Trust Fund, right, is that line that is there on investments. Capital assets are the others, the buildings, the equipment, the plant property and things like that, less any of the depreciation or regular accounting things.
So that's getting too much into, back with Senator De La Cruz, and they was talking, what, for the data for, we're talking about reoccurring of juvenile incarcerations and breaking the generation gap. What companies or what, areas are you guys are getting this data from? Because, I'm not sure. I know there's a lot of privacy laws and all of that, but in the Native Hawaiian community of Waianae Comprehensive, and just walking in that community, there's a lot of data that you can get. So I'm not sure how big are you guys staff for that. And I understand what Senator De La Cruz is happening right now on Hawaii Island, Big Island, Senator Inoy's districts. There's high concentration of sex trafficking and abduction on the Big Island. And I went to a few meetings that a Hawaiian community and the association and the homestead asked me to come because what I do here on Oahu with awareness for sex crimes and children abduction and sex trafficking, sign waving in front of Hawaiian homes and so forth. I just know, the effort that what Senator De La Cruz said is how much of that, I understand you guys can do not just the Native Hawaiian community, whatever the situation is. But my thing is this, it is about the Native Hawaiian community. Because we, in that book you just would show, are the highest. So we should, not only you guys, and I put it on you guys, Hawaiian Homes should have done this decades ago. Because our families and generations that we have now, why they have houselessness. So one day I asked you and I invite you guys, take a ride in Miley's country where we live. And let's go sit down in one tent talking to a pure Native Hawaiian and listen to why she's on the beach. Not because of drugs. Constantly physical and sexual abuse from when she was age 13 years old. Those are the things that we could have helped people like that. But we're too busy worrying about other stuff, but we're not concentrating on the fact of breaking what we call a generation gap. And how we're going to do that is actually put something forward, like Senator De La Cruz said, in writing, moving forward, and really try to help the Hawaiian community that is being affected. Because we're not going to be able to do this overnight. And I understand the resources that you guys have. But if we don't start yesterday, we will continue to fall behind. And we, as a Native community, is going to fall victim to these crimes. So please, if you guys can, whatever you guys need from me too, I'm willing to help. Come out to my community. Let's go walk the district. Let's go talk to our people. Because that's where you guys will get you guys facts. What Senator De La Cruz saying is starting that chart in the trenches. I invite you guys to come with us, me and Senator Sherbakura, and I'll be happy to walk with you guys. Okay, any one of you guys, appreciate it. Thank you, Senator.
But do you have some metrics online already with the grants you currently fund to show the difference in whatever you fund?
So with every grant, right, there's a report and then there's metrics that each grantee is held to, right, as part of their grant. What I think is.
Does that include
helpful-
loans, scholarships, and other spending, or just grants?
So no, it includes loans, right? We have metrics regarding how much outstanding loans, how much were.
No, I'm just talking about the social component.
Oh, the impact. So
Yeah.
the Native Hawaiian Revolving Loan Fund did have a program evaluation of the impacts of the loans on that. What we need to do is programmatic evaluations of the grants themselves, but the aggregation of the grants for that. So what we do have is data on what that program does with that grant.
But not
what-
the overall
Yeah.
scale.
Yeah, so take this and that, and so is being funded by this element, so is being funded, and do that community-based piece.
So,
But what we're working on is all of those funding pieces, those recipients of funds, are they actually moving the needle? That's what we're in the process of putting together. Figuring out whether this group or this entity is moving the needle is a tough job, but we're doing that right now.
yeah, and it may
Yeah.
not be perfect, but somebody
Yeah.
got to try to do it, because
Yeah.
if not, where do we start?
Yeah.
And then how do we know if the money we're putting in or you're putting in is making a difference?
Right.
But I mean, if the governor's going to try to put 100 million into climate change, the monies that you talked about, really, I feel like should be reallocated to these social issues. But that's something for the trustees to go figure out. Have some kind of dashboard
For. the
on your
awarding.
website, a dashboard with all of the metrics and and thank you for the report that you shared with us, the Pat Moran report. So according to the report, OHA spending on a past consultant on Kaka'ako Makai noted about $3 million that may have gone to open waste, fraud, and abuse. What changes were implemented to increase oversight of those kind of contracts? So since the audit came out.
Mhm. Well. The change.
What policy changes have you guys made?
So one of the strengthening pieces and lessons learned from the Plant Moran and the CLA engagement is an inconsistency in policy, procedure, and practice. In some cases, policy did exist, but the practice and the procedure didn't align. In other cases, management override, which doesn't matter what the policy or the practice or the procedure, management override is exactly that. It overrides all of that and then executes that. So in terms of what's being done, one, we're not doing management override. We're following policy, we're following procedure, and we're following practice. That's our response. And our administration response is included in the Plant Moran report. So the report is, 200 some odd pages, and then our response is in addition to that. And those are the commitments that we have made those changes and will continue those practices.
Okay,
Of
so
not doing management override and.
in the
following-
selection process, how much of that is held at the board level and how much of that is delegated to the staff?
So procurement wise, so the board in the budget and in the policies, everything regarding grants is all at the board level. So management can't move categories in and out and as well. The decisions on granting is all based on the trustees. So administration will run the process, call the applications, run the evaluations, make the assessments of the points, and then make recommendations to the trustees. But the absolute decision of the specific awarding is with the trustees. And that's by policy. Same thing with budget. Nothing can move in and out of the budget grant category without trustee approval. Similarly, there's budget limitations, so administration can't move budgets more than 5%. 5% of the category or 100,000, and if it is, then we need to go back to the trustees for that. So if we're trying to move personnel to non-personnel or vice versa, that if it exceeds the 100,000 for that, it needs to go back to trustees. And as a result, we have brought back to trustees a number of what we call budget realignments. Every time we have that and we need that, we need to bring that back, justify it, explain it as well.
Okay, is that an internal policy or is that on your website?
It is definitely a practice and it is a policy. The executive policy manual has
Okay.
codifies what those limitations are. Yeah.
Okay, and then I wanted to ask about the administratively established funds and accounts, including the Native Hawaiian Revolving Loan Fund. So what has been the response so far on those?
So the regular cycled audits, right, were completed by the state auditor. And then we do annually a standalone single audit for the trust funds, and then we post that. So the most current one for fiscal year 22 are out there, and then we're in the process of finishing fiscal year, 21 is out there, and we're in the process of 22. And that's all scheduled to be done by the end of March of this year.
So that's all going to be in compliance now.
Yeah, it's always been in compliance, yeah.
And then did DAGS already provide a date of when they're gonna purge from its system, the Native Hawaiian Rights Fund?
They have not gotten back to us, right? We know that we close it out and policy wise, but on their side, we don't have a lot of control over what they do. But yeah, that is still an outstanding item for them to address.
Just to clarify, that's the overage account, right?
So a while back, there was a Native Rights Fund in which legal issues for beneficiaries were handled through the fund. The fund no longer exists since, I want to say 2016, but if, I think, are you referring to
I'm
the
beginning of stuff.
carryover?
Yeah, I think you're talking about the
The
capital.
carryover trust fund does continue to exist in budget and finance.
Thank you.
And then what about the policy regarding OHA's fiscal stabilization fund?
So the fiscal stabilization policy is there because of Act 29.
So
The
that's being
board-
implemented.
Yes, and the board action, so it was implemented as designed, and then when the need no longer was needed because Act 29 is in place, then the board took action to reverse the stabilization policy.
Okay, what about the permanent policy regarding sanctions established by your code of conduct that's been implemented?
So that needs to be developed with further board policy work.
So what's the timeline on that?
We'll ask, we'll have a discussion with board, on policy. Because there's a number of trustee board policies that still are being worked on, the financial policies, first and foremost. And then this would be bylaws work and the related.
So your projected timeline on that as well?
I would need to talk with board chair about.
Okay, well, she's there. So what's your projected timeline? 6 months.
Maybe by end of fiscal year.
Okay, and has any decision been made as to whether to forward the audit findings to the state and federal authorities for further investigation and possible criminal prosecution?
We have agendized that for this Thursday's meeting. To send it to the proper authorities. We're asking for a board vote.
Makes sense. Any other questions? Senator Keoho Kalole?
So I've already mentioned this to UN trustees before. It would seem to me, maybe perhaps helpful, ultimately up to you, the board, that if this decision about pursuing further enforcement, based off of the results of the audit, if that equals the end of this audit situation that's persisted over the years, it might be worth having just perhaps before the chair of in consultation with the committee, just having a briefing and going over everything, briefing the legislature on it so that it's POW and we can just move on. So it's something to consider because I think that might be helpful. If we really are done.
Yeah.
I'm ready to move on from this.
Yeah, yeah.
If OHA is.
Well, we are. This is why we passed the Plant Moran report on to all the legislators so that you can see that we complied. And
then BNF.
I'm
able
not
to release the money.
suggesting that individual members have not read the full report. But it might be helpful to the body if we can maybe reserve some time and just have a dialogue about it. If that's something that the board believes might be helpful.
We'll talk about it at the next meeting.
yeah,
That's why I bring it up, right? If we've moved on, then that's fine too. No need to reopen the wound.
And then BNF, because there was a proviso, for that.
yes,
And so BNF complied.
yes. We got the
They released the
200,000.
funds.
But it's taken a number of years to work
Yeah.
through. There was the kerfuffle with the auditor. I can't even remember the full progression. It might be nice to have sort of an open discussion about it.
Well, you guys should be commended for moving forward with the Plant Moran audit.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for paying for it.
Yeah.
I do have another question.
Okay.
So, and I'm not sure if action has already been taken, but, so has the board taken action on, participation or support in the Festival of Pacific Arts and Culture?
So I would say historically, this board has not. The last time the board took action on FestPac was in the previous year, pre-cancellation. So what has been, I've talked with board chair, administration does need to bring back a proposal regarding that commitment. And so that this board can make a decision on what that commitment looks like. Because the last time that happened, that was a previous board and of course, pre-COVID. So, so the short answer is no, they have not taken because administration has not brought forward to them the analysis and then the recommendation.
Okay. So as you know, currently the state,
Yeah, can we get a copy of that analysis?
so currently, as you know, the state accounts for, has committed about 15% of the approved budget for the festival, in which 26 island nation delegations will be joining. And we already have a preliminary commitment from a number of governmental delegations. Would be nice to have OHA's participation from a protocol standpoint. We can always let Governor Green lead the delegation to the King of Tonga and the rest of our Polynesian and Oceanic cousins, but
You might have to go and appear and make your case in front of the trustees.
Right.
I think I just did.
And Senator, could you remind us, it's 15% of what's the X?
I believe the commission approved a $20 million proposed budget, of which the state has already committed 15%. And they're in negotiations right now with the federal government and a number of, charitable NGO contributors. And, there will be, as you know, some really significant cultural protocol with the return of the festival after, I believe, 50 years to Hawaii. And
Well, did you give money in the past to this?
We committed money.
Oh, but you didn't. Okay.
We did not fund money.
and then
Yeah.
the festival was canceled because of the pandemic. It
Right.
was scheduled for 2020 and now it's 2024.
Right.
So
Yeah, because I would, even if we get asked, we just want to see an accounting of how the money was spent that was previously released.
I think the state money is all encumbered. Yeah. Transportation, venue,
So on another
stuff we could
note,
encumber it in.
yes, so on another note, how much funds do you guys set aside for your AHWI grants? AHWI, the AHWI grant.
Oh. The annual budget. Sorry. Let's see. 72,000, probably 200,000 per biennium. So 400,000 in the biennium period, split up into 4 cycles.
How do you guys determine how you spread out those monies and who's awarded those monies based on what priorities?
So it's competitive. So the budgeting side of it, when we put the budgets together for the board, those are the budgeting commitments. I've always wanted, when the applications come in, they're healthy, they're good, and if they're more than the budgets, I would like to come back to the board and say, we have a robust pool. We are recommending awarding more, and we're recommending an increase in that awarding. At this point, that hasn't happened.
So,
But essentially, we take that first cut of 400,000 as an example. We run a competitive solicitation. Our external grant reviewers will review basic against rubric that's there. And then recommendations will come in, and then the grants program will go ahead and vet that and make recommendations to the
okay,
um,
so in
the board.
2019, you guys developed and implemented an information management system to ensure that these grants are monitored and evaluated consistently. Can you give me that report? And actually looking for prior to, so from 2022 prior, 5 years going back, how those funds were being used, and have those funds been used towards agriculture, towards Native Hawaiian businesses?
So I believe you're referencing the fondant system that was represented to be a part of the state audit, right? That was one of the responses, that we have a system versus what we have. So this would require us to go ahead and get that information, get the reports out. The board receives on a quarterly basis a grant status of open and closed grants and the dollars spent. But this aggregation, we should be able to pull from the system.
Yeah, I kind of want to see for those that have received those grants, where are they today? Have they been sustainable? And if they haven't, why not? Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Chair, I have a couple more questions. Going back to Kaka'ako, because, you're building a residential is going to be something in a bill that you're preparing. I would like to go back to the Plant Moran audit, and WCIT did some designs. I don't know if you're staying with that design or you have new designs, but I know that HCDA has asked you for your plans and you have a consultant. I would like to see a report of what you're planning to do in terms of the big picture of the Kaka'ako Makai has a plan, it has rules, it has zoning requirements. So what is the consultant doing within the parameters of what is seen by HCDA as very important in terms of your building? So if I could get some report or what WCIT gave you, and was that within that context, because the rules and zoning are really critical. So
Yes, Senator. I think the WCIT report, it was produced on less than the amount of information we have today. So we do have, first drafts of modeling and plans, and they are built around our as of right. So we're not assuming anything. And so we'd be happy to share that once the bill is out.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And it was based also on information you had that I mentioned earlier on the 2009 environmental study, because that's really critical, because
Okay.
you've got all that toxic
Right.
substances underground.
Right.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Senator, thank you for asking that. And I just wanted to also that part of the Plant Moran work and part of even CLA, not all of the contracts that were issued were expended, right? So part of the change in contract monitoring is our change in contract is we go on a statement of work as well as a deliverables base versus sort of open. So the future would be about monitoring deliverables and payment. So not all of the, for example, the WCIT, it may have been encumbered but not paid out because, contract monitoring or the deliverables weren't given.
So in terms of it being a brownfield that you're looking at, that you probably should look at swapping land or getting, I noticed also in your WAM-HWN Appendix I, that you say if you took 7% of the 200 million from 2009, that you would need double the amount. If you looked at appraising the property, because it seems that you need to have monies there to address the brownfields. You've got to be able to build on land that is not on the coastline level, but someplace where it's up. I mean, even the hotels are looking at managed retreat if they're in the coastal zone. So you really need to maybe talk with, I know DOH was the one that did the analysis as well, that before you start those plans, look at what WCIT did or what your current consultant is doing and give us an assessment of that as well, because we're really concerned about the INA.
Yeah, understood.
Thank you.
Can I add?
You can ask. not
Okay,
add.
okay, just regarding the term brownfield. I was the chair of Waterland as well in the early 2000s. We had the brownfields similar to what Senator Moriwaki mentioned. And just to tell you, it can be remediated. Just to let you know, we all dine at Nico's, okay? The fish market there was a brownfield. They could not build the building at that time because of brownfields, but they were the procedural, consultants and DOH remediated the lands back to sustainability, so it could be built. So just to let you know that, it can be remediated on lands that are as such, but, I guess no, because
In the
I
budget.
kind of heard that, the suggestions is probably exchange lands or whatever, but perhaps
What
just
are the-
continue
Okay,
to do
we're
that.
running
What are the
behind
options?
because we still have DCCA, which was supposed to start at 2:30. So I want to try to limit it to questions.
Okay, I got a question.
Because we still have another department.
I just want to say, you're correct, Senator Inoue. Actually, we did some remediation on the piano lot at Kaka'ako. We received federal funds and we did oversee some of that remediation, the concerns that Senator Moriwaki mentioned.
And when the House hears the bill, you guys can add that all to your testimony.
So,
Thank
So-
you.
Senator
Right,
Covella.
so my question is,
Yes,
okay,
sir.
once we get over the remediating and stuff, the Kaka'ako, the housing units on there, is the housing units going to be for affordable Native Hawaiian housing? And how much would that be? Or are we looking at a whole different realm of the kind of housing we're providing on that front?
So two parts to that question. So the OHA cannot dictate who the housing goes to, unlike the HHL. So we would have to, work within our regulations. And then in terms of affordability, we're absolutely focused on building affordable units as part of a mixed, kind of project.
So
But
not exclusive.
but we intend to look at the affordable units as our as one of the priorities there when we build. And so
At what percentage?
that's determined by, HUD and HCDA's ladder, but whatever whatever those limits that are set by HCDA, OHA is well ready to meet them or beat them.
Because that's a minimum.
Yeah,
HCD
yeah.
gives the minimum. That's
Yeah,
not
so it
something-
depends on what
So you can
what
go above.
category of affordable you're talking about. Oh, yeah.
So that's why asking you the question, what is gonna be affordable that our Native Hawaiians can afford and what percentage?
Yeah.
Because I think the idea for us is, since you folks are to address Native Hawaiians, not just they're on the list, but to afford that. You know, you get a different range of Native Hawaiians, yeah.
Sure.
So I wanted to know what is the percentage that you folks are looking at?
We-
Because I don't know what the package you guys turned
Yeah, well,
over.
Yeah,
all-
before-
all those details
before
be in
we-
the bill
yeah.
though?
Yeah,
Well, those details can be, talked about in discussion with the bill. It may not all be in the bill, but we'd be happy to talk about all of those
that could
details.
make a big difference whether or not the support comes behind it,
Yeah.
because we're
Yeah.
trying to address our Native Hawaiian homeless population under affordability.
Yeah, agree. Agree.
And we feel the same way.
Well, at least not the 120% AMI. It's got to be like 80% what people can afford. So 80% AMI of all the units, because HCDA is a minimum.
Okay, you
as
need a
Senator King
question.
said.
This is not a discussion.
Question, since we're talking about Kako, okay, so for.
It has to be a question.
It is a question, but I'm gonna break them out into a question. So what action that have OHA taken to get the highest and best use of Kako Makai? Because the reason why I'm bringing this up, if we didn't do anything on strychnine, contaminated land, there would be no Kapolei. There'd be no Ocean Point. There'd be no Ever Beach. Because why? They built everything on top of Canefield, strychnine and everything. So there is ways of getting it done. You know what I mean? But the thing that I wanted to bring up, Chair, is that why don't you guys do this? Instead of waiting for the house, to have a house party, why don't you guys work with Hawaiian Homes? Have some government exemptions that they can build and let them build a building. You guys work with them and move them over to Hawaiian Homes. They exempt and they can build. I mean, that's only a thought. It wasn't for me though. I got it from somebody else smarter
That's
than
not the first time. That's not the first time this came up though. Yeah, so. Okay, what statute authorizes OHA to develop LLCs without authorization from the legislature?
Follow up with that, but the board's establishment of mechanisms, right, is ultimate. The board
Yeah,
can.
so if you can just
establish-
give us a legal opinion from the AG then,
Okay, over from the AG
Yeah.
or our.
or if your own legal.
Okay.
And then we can share that with the AG. And then I know we talked a lot about Kaka'ako, but I'm a little more interested in Kukani Loco, and I haven't seen any development there of or cleaning of it in quite some time.
Mhm.
And you got it the same, I mean, ADC gets a lot of criticism. You got it the same time as ADC, and ADC's actually made way more progress than OHA.
Yeah. Yeah, we have,
So what are you guys doing about it?
yeah, I mean, we have no excuses. We're working on all of our lands in our portfolio. Kukani Loco is very special to us. We
If
did
it was,
come,
you'd pay more attention
we
to
did,
it.
we did come 3 sessions ago with a CIP ask to put water in out there so that we can get, some agriculture going. That didn't come
But
through.
did you finalize your master plan yet?
There's a conceptual master plan that's finalized,
So how
but
can you ask for CIP if
Yeah.
you still have a conception versus a master plan that's finalized?
yeah, I mean, that's that at the time, that was what we were seeking. The master plan, is in the queue. The master plan's in the queue.
If you're seeking that money and now you got all this money, why can't you use some of the money we just gave you guys?
Well, you got the extra,
Yeah.
we gave you a larger amount last year.
Yeah.
Why can't you use those money?
So that's part of budget planning, budget construction, right, to use that and to.
Well,
make
at
those
some point you
decisions.
want it, I mean, what's your end game? It's just.
Yep.
There's
Yep.
no movement. I don't know when you're hoping to get something a little more finalized.
So like Casey said, right, the board has seen, and this is the board, 2 board chairs ago.
And we talked about reforestation in some areas. I think the community talked about visitor center.
Mhm.
They talked about lots of different things.
Collaboration with Uncle Tom then, yeah,
But we haven't seen anything.
correct. So that's part of something.
Yeah,
right,
so if you show that kind of enthusiasm, I'm talking about Kaka'ako, you want my enthusiasm, so sure, you know what you gotta do.
We agree.
So it looks like it's gonna have to be
Tru-
some future
Trust-
year.
Trustee reminding me that there was an effort a few years ago to, as a company, to go and plant trees there at least to get over 100,
I don't know what's going on.
200,
But you
200
gotta do
trees, but
something.
yeah, it's in the queue. We
But you
totally
just-
understand.
You just can't be Kaka'ako-centric in your thinking. You
Agreed.
have other assets.
Agreed. Yeah.
Yes, the last question. So if, let's say Kakako, you guys talking about, cultural center, yeah? So if, for whatever reason, Kakako take 49 years, are we ever gonna have a cultural center? We should have it on the largest Hawaiian community on my side of the island. I mean, we should have,
Okay.
oh, in Molokai, sorry. But we'll build a substation in Molokai, then we'll build.
This is, you know what, this is subject matter discussion.
see,
You
that-
guys talk about it in Hawaiian
that's
affairs.
Yeah.
Okay, what about,
Sumner.
one of the things that we had in the last bill was the committee for the continuing negotiations. So what is the status on that?
So board chair named herself, trustee Trask and Sherry Broder. Governor Ige named Neil Miyahira, Ryan Kanaka-Ole, and Neil from Harbors to that committee, and we need to meet and get started on that work.
Okay, so does that committee follow sunshine law?
Supposed to.
I don't know the provisions of what Act 226 did, so if it needs to, we'll make sure that we follow.
I don't remember an exemption from it, but I
don't
think everyone
either.
would be very interested to see how those negotiations go.
I don't either. So part of it is reaching out and if Governor Green is gonna continue to retain those three individuals on the work group, because it was appointed by a previous governor. I think that's the first place we'd like to start for that to affirm.
But no discussion yet.
No discussion. Yeah.
And
Just
I'm not sure
naming.
if you followed Queen Liliuokalani Trust, how they sold already 2 hotels. So, they're taking trust land and they're selling it. Would OHA ever consider talking to the other trusts and trying to see if you could acquire some of those lands before they sell it to anyone else? I mean, kind of keep it in Hawaiian hands.
Yes. Not knowing the opportunity,
Because they already sold 2.
yeah. So knowing of the opportunity after the fact, no quiet conversation. has
And
come
it
to us.
sounds like I just heard, this is from their website. The trust owns a 3rd Waikiki property, more than 4 acres beneath Waikiki Beach Marriott Resort, which is not for sale at this time. So they didn't say it's not for sale. They said it's not for sale at this time. So I just think it's sad that the trusts are all liquidating assets and no one seems to be concerned about it, but we keep talking about Crown and ceded lands, but we don't seem to care what the other trusts are doing. Liquidating assets. So then I also wanted to talk about, instead of the pro rata share, if we can have some kind of discussion at some point on a future or master settlement of actually trying to figure out what the inventory is on Crown ceded lands, what the value is, and have a discussion between the state and OHA as to how we're going to settle it in regards to property ownership, partnership, land use, cash, so that we don't have to do future payments. So that's something that I think is probably is better for both the state and OHA to have all those different assets. I think you need them.
Is, we don't have an inventory. Do
Yeah.
you?
No, so that's what I'm saying is we have to at least establish that.
Yes.
But if we have a working group, and I think the working group would have to have at least an executive director to bird dog the departments. But if you don't have a working group that can agree to who the ED should be, a couple of people from the state, a couple of people from OHA to at least agree on that one person to be kind of pulling all this together. I
Mhm.
mean, it has to start somewhere. That's to me more important than this pro rata share.
I agree.
Okay. One thing agreeing, another thing is I'll do something about it, but
So when the lands were transferred to the state of Hawaii, what was the description of the lands? Where is the description? Because it's in the state's hands as a steward. So we question, where is the description of that transmission of the lands from the federal to the state?
Yeah, so if we can at least have the working group work on this.
Okay,
And we can hopefully get to some agreement incrementally so we can come up with something.
mhm.
If not, we're going to be arguing about net versus gross. And I don't know if a future Ways and Means chair is going to do what they did last session. So we're better off trying to think bigger, more macro, more futuristic instead of worrying about small details. It's not going to really make a difference. So I'll work with you guys if you are open to that, to some legislation that moves that thought forward. But we only have a couple weeks.
Mm.
So you go identify someone we can work with. See,
Yeah, identifying the people is
no, at least
the
one
first
point
task.
person
Yeah.
for us
Yeah.
to work with on
And-
drafting some measure.
And if our
We
trustees,
can amend it along the way, so the bill doesn't have to be final form. We just have the concepts.
I think we would probably ask Sherry Broder to represent OHA because she has the history of the
No, I'm
public
just
land
talking
trust.
about who do we work with, and we wanted to draft something to have that, so we at least have a vehicle in during session.
Yeah, should be her. Should be Sherry.
Well, you
we'll
talk
we'll
about
let
it
you know
first.
after we talk about
Yeah,
it.
you talk about it
Senator.
first, because yeah,
Because that concept of master settlement is something that the board needs to discuss conceptually. right?
first, yeah. I mean, it sounds like everyone's open, so we just got to figure this out.
Conceptually, and then what actually the bill looks like, right? So.
Yeah, I
think
think it's
that's a
actually going to have to be,
discussion.
I don't think we can put all the details in there. I think the working group is going to have to come up with something that's gonna maybe come up with a bill
Yeah.
that takes it even a step further.
So if we can help with the working group to be, more directive in some respects,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It's very broad, what's currently in
Yeah.
226, but if so, additional insights so that the work group can really focus and
Yeah.
getting some base data. Yeah.
We just need a vehicle we can amend
Mhm.
because we're running out of time. If not, I can come up with something. Okay, any other questions?
Just on changing the subject to education, for Okako, hopefully that you'll continue the program. Didn't you add Waianae though, aside from Hawai'i and Molokai to the school program, the grant program? On the education side,
Well, it's a charter school.
the charter school.
So we continue to support Hawaiian focused charter schools and then all 17 that are in the portfolio.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
that's great because I know Kamehameha Schools has cut back contributing to participating with you folks on some of these schools, so they're left behind. So thank you so much for
Yeah.
providing that necessary for those disadvantaged schools that you had. But I know your last report, you only included Hawaii and Molokai, but I think you added Waianae. Did you add one
So
school?
of the 17 Hawaiian focused charter schools, right? Waianae may be a Kaiapuni program, which
Oh,
might
okay.
be slightly
Conversion.
different. Or is it a
Maybe
Kaiapuni charter?
There's a conversion charter school and a startup too.
Yeah,
Mhm.
so to the extent
Plus
they're
involved.
in the charter, but there are also Kaiapuni programs that are not in the charter system.
Oh, yeah, the
Yeah,
public school too, yeah.
yeah, the public
Not
school
included
side of it,
eligible.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, but
Okay.
definitely if it's a.
But
Hawaiian
thank you
focused
anyway,
charter
but you're
school.
gonna continue then.
Yes,
Oh, yeah.
Good,
yeah, they're
thank you.
involved.
thank you.
Senator Kim.
Just request to, that you folks can get back to us unless you've already submitted it. The breakdown of the admin expenses, including the range
we-
of salaries.
we have- yeah.
and
Yeah.
Recipients.
So for the
So-
committee, if you have follow-up questions that you want us to include in our memo to the agencies, we can add it.
Okay, the vacancy positions and the salaries, and then the $164 million breakdown.
We
of what
captured that, yeah.
includes.
Could you clarify 164 million?
The 164 million, the Act 226.
The 64 million?
Oh, I thought it was still 164, just 64.
Okay. I was like,
Okay, okay, if no further questions, we're gonna adjourn. We're gonna take a 15-minute break because IT has to set up, I guess, set up for the next meeting. Okay, adjourn. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mahalo.
Thank you.